Hey, welcome back to the Tech Shop here at the Innovation Center at Genesee Valley Central School, and today we're going to be talking about the combination sander. It's going to be exciting. It's one of my favorite tools, but it is also one of the most dangerous tools in the shop if you don't respect it the right way. So we're going to get into it here in just a second. Stay tuned. First thing I want to explain about the combo sander is the point and the purpose. We call it a combination sander because it's both a disc sander and a belt sander in the same machine, driven by one motor on the backside, controlled by one switch. When you're running the combo sander, you want to make sure you're the only one running this machine. You don't want one person working here on the table with the disc sander and somebody else working on the back on the belt sander. One, you're going to get in each other's way, and two, way too many variables for safe operation. So make sure there's only one person on this machine at one time, even if there are two locations where work can be done. Okay? The tool functions very simply. The disc spins in a counterclockwise direction, the belt spins in the same direction. So if I go ahead and turn this on, okay, you're going to notice the disc is spinning backwards, the belt is spinning in that direction, okay? You're going to take your workpiece, and as you're working with this, you're going to make sure that you hold it flat against the table and don't let it float up, because if you float it up and it grabs onto that disc, it's going to come down very happily and you are going to get the nastiest pinch of your life. So make sure that you're holding your workpiece flat against the work surface when you're working with the disc. The belt on the back, however, you get a little bit more maneuverability with this. You want to make sure you hold it with two hands. There is a stop guard fitted on here. We can take that off if you need to work with large pieces and this gets in the way. But if you're working with small pieces, it's kind of nice to have something there to catch your workpiece. When you're working with the combo sander, we always want to make sure the dust collector is hooked up. Okay? We are going to make a lot of dust with the sander. Okay? So you want to make sure that you keep that out of the air so people aren't breathing it. So we hook up the dust collector. There's a port on the back that the hose just slips over, and then for the disc, there's a port on the front that the hose should slip on, kind of like that. Okay? So, disc sander, ports on the bottom, belt sander, ports on the back. Make sure that that's hooked up. It's going to keep our air quality nice and clean for everybody here in the shop. Okay. When you're working with the tool, make sure that the part that you're looking for is facing you. So if I'm working with the disc is facing me here. If I need to work with the belt, yes, you can reach back here, but just be mindful that your disc is here. If you don't like it, this one just happens to be outfitted on our workbench. You pull the pin that's on this side, and the whole tool will spin around. It's kind of heavy. Okay, so give her a push, it'll slip around, and then there's a hole in the workbench here. Just drop the pin in, and then it's fixed. Okay, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to work with it in this position because I'm comfortable. All right, you need to understand something about grit. Okay, everything that sands has a grit to it. Okay, I have over here my sanding box. There is loose sandpaper and disc sandpaper for two different applications. We'll talk about that on a separate video. But I'm going to bring these over to the camera here. I'm going to take something that's extremely coarse grit and extremely fine grit and mess up our camera shot. Notice the fine grit has little tiny sand particles and the coarse grit has much larger sand particles. These are for two very different sanding applications. Coarse grit is for removing a lot of material fairly quickly, not as quickly as a saw blade. So don't confuse sanding with something that you should be using a saw to remove, okay? Coarse grit removes a lot of wood material quickly. Fine grit is for finish sanding, taking scratches out of your wood before you get down to finishing using polyurethane or paint or whatever you decide that you're going to finish your project with, okay? So make sure that the grit on these machines are appropriate. This is a brand new disc. It's 120 grit, so it's pretty aggressive at removing material. 80 grit, way more aggressive. The smaller the number, the bigger the course is, the more coarse the material is, and the bigger the grit is on the sanding material. The belt is a little bit wore down, so that started out as a 120, but it's probably more like a 180 or a 220 at this point, which means this is creeping up on the world of finishing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn the dust collector on now, and I'll meet you back here while we sand this little curve on the end of the board. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna sand this curve on the end of this board. I would go in and I would take my bandsaw and I would remove a majority of this material, but since this is a fairly new disc, I think we'll be fine. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna sneak up on this. This side of my board is my keeper. I'm gonna mark that with a K. This is my waste side. The objective here is that I'm gonna use the sander to get right up against this curve here and get that profile, okay? With nothing on my table, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the tool on and I'm gonna let it come up to full speed. Please note that I have my sleeves rolled up and I have my safety glasses on, and if I had long hair, my long hair would be tied back. There we go. Tool is on, it's come up to full speed, okay? On this tool, there's an upspin side and a downspin side. I never sand on the upspin side, spinning in this direction. I'm gonna stay from the center of the disc to the outside to the left, never to the right. It could grab the disc and my piece could pick up off the table. So from the center to the left side edge. I'm gonna come in. You'll notice that my brand new sanding disc is starting to collect up some of my material. I'm going back and forth, holding it flat to the table. It's not up in the air. Got it down flat, just kind of steering back and forth. When I get to the line, and slow down, okay? Something to notice that as I'm sanding, my wood material is starting to build up on my sanding disc. The areas that have gone brown is where the pine pitch is built up into the grit on the sanding disc. It's no longer cutting, it's more melting / burning the wood. You'll also notice here, I've got a little bit of burning going on. It's building up heat. It's not cutting and getting that material away. So I'll have to come in and clean that off with a rubber sanding abrasive clean, okay? But you can see, now that I've got my nice clean edge here, I've snuck up onto my line and it's actually a pretty decent finish. I can then take a piece of hand sandpaper and just work off those burn marks, and I've got a nice product edge that can get finished. Now for the belt sander side of things, I got some fur on the top here from when I cut this on the table, so I want to get that off. I need to make that nice and smooth. Now something that can happen when you're working on the belt sander is it can tip back and forth. So it may not be the best application using a sander in this fashion if I need to make sure that my edges and my faces stay nice and square. But for the sake of argument, I will show you how the belt works. I'm gonna move my dust collector to the end of the belt, turn it on, let it come up to speed, and slowly set my piece on, holding firm with both hands. It's gonna move forward and hit the fence, and now I'm gonna just slowly move it back and forth, spreading out the workload across the belt. You can see on the back side where the sawdust is streaking off the back and going into the port. Now I have a nice, smooth, clean, even finish here, ready for sanding. If I don't keep even pressure when I'm working on the belt, it's not gonna be flat, it's all of a sudden gonna start to angle on me, okay? So, don't put a lot of pressure, it will eat a lot of material away. Something to remember with belt sanding and disc sanding, these are cutting tools, okay? Aluminum oxide is impregnated onto the belt and the disc. That's a very, very hard crystalline structure. If your hand were to slip in here, you'll get the nastiest brush burn possible, and you will pinch your hand between the table and the disc, okay? So not only are you gonna pinch it, you're also going to remove all the skin off the back of your hand. I may or may not have done that in middle school while sanding a really flat piece of wood and it took off on me. If you're operating this without the guard, and you put down too much pressure, your piece could shoot off the table. Don't put down a ton of pressure. Make sure you've got a finger on it or a good solid grip so that your piece doesn't take off when you're running the belt. Acts just like a conveyor belt, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let's just double check and make sure we covered things. Number one, check your grit, make sure that it's not too coarse and removing too much material or too fine and gonna burn your wood. okay? Always tie back your clothing, okay? If my shirt sleeve or my hair were to get caught in here, I'm gonna go for a ride. That's what makes this one of the most dangerous tools in the shop, is if your hair falls forward and gets pinched between the fence and the belt, or between the disc and the table, you're gonna go in, okay? Keep your hair tied back, keep your clothing tied back, okay? Make sure that there's a little bit of clearance here between the disc and the table. Not too much so that things can get sucked down in, but also so that the disc isn't running right up against the table, okay? Hold your material flat against the table, otherwise it's gonna snap as soon as you touch it. Do not sand past to the right of the center mark. I'm gonna be putting black marks on here saying no sand on this side. You sand from the center to the left. There is a miter gauge on here that if you want to drop in, a miter slot, so if you want to drop in the miter gauge, now you can sand 90-degree angles against the disc, okay? This miter gauge is now 90-degree angle to the disc, so I can get a sanded 90-degree edge, kind of handy to have. Sanders are meant to sneak up on measurements, okay? Don't overly aggressive, don't make it up as you go along. Make sure you've got a cut mark that you're trying to sand to and a result that you're aiming for, okay? Keep your stock moving back and forth. As I was running the disc, I was moving my piece. I need to use this entire surface. If you sand and hold it in one spot, it's gonna build up heat, it's gonna ruin the disc, and it's gonna ruin your piece. So use the entire surface from the center to the edge or from one side to the other. If the belt is not tracking properly, meaning it looks like it's drifting off the back or it's drifting too far to the left, come get me because it needs to be adjusted. The belt should run in the very center of the table. If the disc is chipped, cracked, broken, missing pieces, or really gummed up, come get me. We can change this out, okay? It's your responsibility as the operator to check the condition of the tool. If there's a tear in the belt, we can't use it. We gotta put a new belt on, okay? Never walk away from the tool while it's coasting. I'm done with it, I turn it off, I walk away. Nobody is supervising this tool. Somebody could walk up and accidentally bump into it or stick something in it and it could shoot off. Wait for the tool to stop before you leave, okay? Keep it under control. Lastly, if you're sanding material, if there happens to be nail, grit, a lot of latex paint, don't use the sander to remove those materials, okay? A hidden nail will tear these abrasive surfaces. Please check your material before getting on the machine. Latex paint will gum up the abrasives. Don't use latex paint. Or don't sand materials with latex paint on them, okay? Other than that, the belt sander and the disc sander are a lot of fun to use. They do give you a really nice product when you get done with it, and they'll speed up your finishing time from hand sanding immensely, okay? Just use it safely, and we'll see you during the next tool introduction.